Hello, my name is Hemingway Jones, and if you've seen my channel, then you know that I am an avid and enthusiastic journaler. And as part of journaling and to get the most out of it, I'm often looking for inspiration from various sources, including from some amazing historic journals and the minds that produce them. So today I'm going to introduce you to 4 extraordinary writers and their amazing journals. And I'm saving the most amazing for last. So join me today, won't you, as I introduce you to 4 extraordinary journals from famous people. Keep a notebook, travel with it, eat with it, sleep with it. Slap into it every stray thought that flutters up into your brain. Jack London. The first extraordinary and interesting person I'm going to introduce to you is Anas Nin. Anas Nin is the writer of many books including Delta, Venus, and Little Birds. She began her journal at a very young age in 1914, sailing to America. Her father, Joaquin Nin, a Cuban composer, had abandoned the family, and Anas's journal began, as many of ours does, from trauma and the pain of loss. At her young age, she had hoped that she could write the perfect letter to entice her father to rejoin her family. He never would. And over the years, Anas would use her diary as a source of comfort and solace, confiding in it, confessing, and examining her beliefs and battling what she called her neuroses. She wrote in French, Spanish, and English, using different languages to convey different thoughts. Now, Anas wrote in a lot of different notebooks and journals that she could find of the time, and even in some leather-bound books, quite a bit like this one from Bottega Obscura that I use. She also took very good care of her journals and kept them in a bank vault. Anas was depressed her entire life, suffering the effects of parental abandonment. And although she was often in therapy, her journal was also a tool for diagnoses and self-reflection. Her diary was a way for her to solve the problem of herself. She kept a diary until her death in 1977. By 1966, when her diary was typed out, it contained 15,000 pages. Now, Anas wasn't content to simply write a journal or a diary. She wanted to publish it as well. She published the first edition of her diary, covering the years of 1931 to 1934 in the 1960s. These diaries are so personal, so honest, so unvarnished, so fearlessly self-revelatory. Her diary is dripping with sensuality and the complex personal ramifications of falling in love with the American writer Henry Miller, and the guilt and drama of coming between him and his strikingly beautiful wife, June. This was all captured in the now near-lost film Henry and June, directed by Philip Kaufman and made in 1990. Starring Fred Ward, Uma Thurman, and Maria de Medeiros. This episode of her life is fascinating, though later editions of her journals go to much darker places. Setting that aside, I celebrate her for being so interested into her internal life. She faced all of her pain and darkness in her rich and fertile mind. She exhumed the beasts and corpses of her regrets, fears, and anxieties, and stared into their faces, describing them in meticulous detail. Her entire life was a confession to the page and a longing of connection beyond it. She traveled a series of escalating adventures, redefining her values and constraints, often shattering societal restraints, and in the end found some solace and a place where she, and perhaps only she, felt comfortable. In the journal, I am at ease. Anas Nin. Let's now turn our attention from France to old Mexico, and one of my favorite writers that draws a line through the history of this amazing country. Now we're going to look at the diary and journal of Frida Kahlo. Frida Kahlo is one of my favorite artists. Her art was intensely personal, and she established a unique visual vocabulary and mythology that accesses the iconic and the universal. You can experience the pain in her work viscerally. You can feel her isolation, the throbbing nerve endings on fire of a body in rebellion against its helmsman. Her life was a life of pain, but she expressed that pain with immeasurable beauty. Her work was intensely autobiographic, and so it's no surprise that she would also embrace journaling, especially during the last 10 years of her life, 1944 to 1954. Her journal, of course, is written in her own hand, in multiple colors of ink, in incredible drawings and symbols, in a writing style that evokes music. When she was young, Frida had been in a horrible bus accident, and her spine was reassembled from the broken pieces of plaster it had become. Although she would recover and even walk again, she endured constant pain, often debilitatingly so. Imagine this physical pain and the pressure of trying to deal with it psychologically, to recontextualize your life, to transcend the pain if possible. Imagine all of this and turning toward the brush as your salvation. Now, her journal was a repository of her views on art, on color, on composition, and it was also a place for her to get to know herself better. In it, she wrote about the pain in her body and how deeply it affected her. She wrote in this interesting flowing cursive in Spanish using pen, watercolor, pastel, and other media. She didn't limit herself. She wrote in a blank book that a friend gave her. Her diaries are also full of energetic drawings that are visceral and cathartic, illustrating the themes around them. They're often steeped in mythology, the same mythology of her paintings, full of elements of Mexican folk traditions. I wish I could do whatever I liked behind the curtain of madness. Frida Kahlo. In her journal were messages to Diego Rivera, her husband, the amazing artist, and her tormentor. To give you an idea of Frida Kahlo's amazing strength and courage, after one of her legs were amputated, she famously wrote, "Feet, what do I need you for, if I have wings to fly?" Like so many of us, her journal was also born of pain, suffering. Right up until the end, her final journal entry translates as, "I hope the exit is joyful, and I hope never to return." Her art remains as a lasting testament to a truly original creative voice, who redefined art and created a powerful visual style, not so much despite, but rather through, the constant pain of a wrecked body. I really think Frida Kahlo is just such a fantastic inspiration. She achieved so much and under so much pain and duress, with so much drama in her life and so much chaos, and yet these paintings are just so incredibly personal and just really express that pain, that suffering, but in a transcendent way. It just offers hope for all of us that struggle with these issues. Now, let's turn our attention to perhaps the most famous journal of all time and one of the most famous people, period. Let's go back to the Renaissance and examine the journals and notebooks of Leonardo da Vinci. Yes, Leonardo da Vinci is perhaps the most famous diarist of all time, and he is an indisputable genius. And that word genius gets bandied about like a shuttlecock, but let's be honest. Leonardo da Vinci is the true expression of the word. His thirst for knowledge and his ability to distill and apply what he learned in solving various problems, even if he did solve those problems at the edge of practicality. He was an amazing inventor, engineer, painter, and sculptor. Fortunately for us, and in concerning us today, he also kept copious notes since the 1480s when he was a military engineer for the Duke of Milan. His notes were composed of diagrams of his various projects and inventions, close observations of everything around him, and his insights on what he thought of the world around him. Now, curiously, there were only a handful of truly personal journal entries, and these involved the death of his father. So this makes Leonardo da Vinci an excellent guide for those of us who want to journal, but do not want to reveal too much or really anything at all about ourselves. For those of us who would rather use our journals for more immediate, practical applications, Leonardo da Vinci is perfect inspiration. So excuse the pun, but if you want to take a page from Leonardo da Vinci, then use your journal to describe your home projects, your different work projects that you're working on, your observations perhaps of your garden, things like that. Very practical applications that are analyzed from different angles. If you do that, then you're journaling in the spirit of Leonardo da Vinci. And of course, Leonardo da Vinci's journals were written in his famous mirror writing. Was this a code to hide his writing from a casual observer? One theory is that he developed this method of writing because he was left-handed and it was easier for him to write this way. I rather like that theory. Whatever the reason, it's truly unknown, but it's certainly fun to speculate. And I'm also told that you can learn to read his writing fairly quickly if you get into the sort of visual language of it. Your brain does adapt. Also, if you really think about it, if it was a code, it's not a very good one. As an aside, I absolutely love the character of the Iron Gall ink that he used to write his journal, the way it looks brown to black depending on how it's aged and its exposure to the elements. It's just such a neat effect, and were I ever to design an ink color, I would want to somehow copy that and emulate that effect with immediacy rather than waiting for 500 years. Leonardo's journals were written on loose sheets of paper that were supplied by the stationers' shops in Milan. These were later folded into booklets and then bound into codices. During his lifetime, Leonardo da Vinci wrote 28,000 pages of notes, and they're now housed in 50 different notebooks. As mentioned, I imagine he would have written with a quill, a bird's feather hardened before use by being baked in hot sand. Now imagine if Leonardo da Vinci had set his mind upon inventing a fountain pen. We may have got the Waterman 52, maybe 400 years earlier. The noblest pleasure is the joy of understanding. Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci's journals were the palette on which his life's projects were mixed. It was a way of breaking down complex problems into more manageable forms, with the overarching goal of understanding the mechanical functions of the world. So I promised that I saved the most interesting for last, and to me it certainly is. So it is with much pleasure that I introduce you to the journals or thoughts of the Emperor Marcus Aurelius.
He touched me on the shoulder and I was free. You knew Marcus Aurelius? I did not say I knew him. I said he touched me on the shoulder once.
Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart. Marcus Aurelius. Ah, yes, in my opinion, the most outstanding journal of all time, and it's passed down through the centuries, which makes it more amazing, is the Journal of the Emperor Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius was Emperor of Rome from 161 to 180. He was known as the last of the Nerva Antonine 5 good emperors. His death at 58, and not as a grizzled old man as he is often depicted, marked the end of the Pax Romana, an age of relative stability and peace for the Roman Empire. 58 years old. Can you imagine? I'm 57 as I'm recording this. That hits home. It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live. Marcus Aurelius. Now, Marcus Aurelius is often called a Stoic philosopher, but it'd be more accurate to call him a student of Stoicism, as we see in his Meditations. The Meditations of Marcus Aurelius is a title that was given to his collection of thoughts and aphorisms. In it, he reflects on his life, his place in the world, and his struggle to come to terms with his fear of death and the corruption of power. The tension in Marcus Aurelius's life is, how do you remain a good person when you are the most powerful person in the world? As we know, absolute power corrupts. So how does Marcus Aurelius safeguard against it corrupting him? The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane. Marcus Aurelius. Now, for me, and the thing that makes this so interesting, all of his writings and what he said, is that we get a clear insight into the mind of an ancient man. And an ancient man that's struggling with the same issues of relevance and fear of death and family and how do I fit in this crazy world. And to me, that is so incredibly moving. It's the personal in Marcus Aurelius that affects me. It's the fact that my fears and anxieties and yearning for relevance and connection are shared by someone who lived 2,000 years ago. Now, Marcus Aurelius's comments read a bit like folksy advice or self-help, but we can also read a certain desperate earnestness to know himself, to remain disciplined, and to be at peace with the world. Never let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present. Marcus Aurelius. Where a man can live, there he can also live well. But he must live in a palace. Well then, he can also live well in a palace. Marcus Aurelius. See, there's always that tension between office and duty and your own personal moral code. So here we have 4 extraordinary people and their journals. And from this, we can see the tremendous breadth of human experience and all those things that we have and always have had in common. The need for love, the need for connection, and that constant struggle to reconcile ourselves with the people and the world around us while remaining true to our moral code. For me, this is the power of looking at other people's journals. But what do you think? Which of these affected you the most? Do you find inspiration in other people's journals as well? Please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more, please subscribe. And if you really want to support the channel further, consider membership. We have a pen pal group for Illuminati and Cognoscenti members, so I'd like to see behind the scenes as well. So I make new videos all the time, and I have a live show each week as well, so I can promise you we will see each other again very soon, further up the road. So until then, stay inspired and keep writing.